Philippe, how are you?
I am doing very well, Mukund. It's a pleasure meeting you, and thank you for inviting me on your great podcast.
No, absolutely. How is sunny California right now? Is it
Well,
better now, the
sunny
weather?
California is sunny. We have a beautiful weather. We're not quite in the hot summer days yet, but we're transitioning toward that. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful weather.
Yeah, no, I'm in Seattle. 90% of the time when I talk to people, it's usually raining.
Right.
Today, it's just cloudy, not raining yet. It rained in the morning.
Yeah, Seattle, when it's shiny, it's like London. It's a magic place. I remember walking with Bill Gates many, many years ago, and we just walked out for like an hour or two, and it was beautiful day, and it was just magic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Philippe, give us a little bit of a background, just 2 minutes. I know, I've been following you for quite a bit of time, but I
Mhm.
don't think a lot of my audience knows about Blue Dot in particular, and also
Mhm.
just about your background. You worked all the way from folks in Apple and Steve Jobs. So, walk us through a little bit of your journey and where you are right now.
Yeah, so I have a very entrepreneurial mindset. I like to transform ideas, whether they are crazy or not, and most of the time they are, into real businesses. It's this transformation that really makes me tick. And it's very, very hard. So I moved to Silicon Valley 35 years ago, and this is home for me. I studied a unique software company and I sold it. And then I went to Hachette, one of the largest publishing companies in the world, helped them with the transition from atoms to bits, getting into digital, publishing. Then I worked at Apple, where I studied the online internet commerce group and the online store. And then I became a VC by accident. So I invested $44 million, generated about $160 million because I got lucky on a couple of deals, which is the model. And then I went into management consulting, where I've been for 15, 17 years now. And Blue Dot specifically is focused on one thing and one thing only, which is how do we help CEOs grow their business? And the question about what do I do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow my business, it's a deceptively simple question, but it's really, really hard to answer. It's a bit like saying, what do I do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to be a good parent? And you don't
Yeah.
quite know where to start. So we found a very unique approach and very unique way to address that challenge that we've been refining over the past 10 years. And we help companies grow faster based on our unique approach.
You've written a book as well
Mhm.
before, and I got a chance to be able to just peruse through some portions of the first few chapters of the book. Walk us through just your concept associated with alignment. What does
Yeah,
that mean? How do you think about it? And what are the things that you talk about in alignment?
so I think there were two big insights behind the book. One is that I realized that the maximum growth rate of a business can only be achieved when that business and its target market are perfectly aligned. It's the misalignment between those two things that introducing the slowing down of the business. A little bit like in a mechanical watch, if you misalign the gears, the watch may still be working, but it will slow down and it will eventually stop ticking. So that was the first big insight. The second one is kind of I went further and was thinking, well, what does it mean to really align a business with its target market? And the second big discovery that I made, which was very profound for me, was that there are four universal axes of alignment between any business and its target market.
Hmm.
And the stunning fact is that they are truly universal. So it doesn't matter what the company does, what stage it's at, what it sells, where it's geographically, and so on and so forth. I can apply it to a cafe on the left bank in Paris, and I can apply it to Amazon or Microsoft, the companies you worked before. So the four axes of alignment are the following. The first one is that the pain of the customer and the claim that the business makes to address that pain must be aligned. Right? So if you have a headache and you come to me and I give you a stomachache pill, well, obviously your pain and my claim are not aligned. You will never buy my pill, and nor should you. The second axis of alignment is that your perception, which is how you understand my claim, and my messaging, which is how I express it to you, must be aligned. So imagine I have the right pill for your headache and I describe it to you in Korean. I'm assuming you don't speak Korean.
I
then
don't.
you will never buy it. Well, I used to do it in French, and the guy would say, "Well, I actually speak French," so that didn't work. So you would never buy it because you're like, "What the heck is this guy talking about?" Right? You don't understand what I'm talking about, even though I have the perfect pill for your headache. That's the second axis.
Or another way to say it is if you have a pill for a headache and you messages that this cures cancer, I'm like, I don't have cancer,
Right.
man.
Right.
Even though it might solve my headache, I'm like, yeah, I don't have cancer. Don't worry about it.
That's right. So I'm a skydiver. I've done 1,000 jumps. If you're trying to sell a gear to me and you're not using the lingo that we use, it's like this guy doesn't know anything about skydiving. There's no way I'm going to buy his parachute because I don't trust, I don't trust the product.
Right.
That's the second axis. The third one is the way customers want to acquire and buy the product, the purchase, has to be aligned with the sales, which is the way the company is selling the product in the marketplace. So if I say, well, you can get my pill, but you have to fly here in Palo Alto, where I am, you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm in Seattle. There's a pharmacy just down the street. Why can't I just walk there and buy the pill? And then the fourth axis is my favorite one called I stole it out of the Apple playbook. So I spent several years at Apple, and during the last one, I worked for Steve Jobs, which is how I lost my hair, in case you ever wondered. But I learned a lot of really interesting lessons from Steve. And one of them that I learned, which was the foundation of that fourth axis, is that I realized that there is one and only one business on this planet. I made the realization that everybody is in the exact same business. So there are not 10 million different businesses, there is only one. And that unique business is the manufacturing and delivery of delight.
Mm,
That's the business everybody is in. And so the fourth axis of alignment is what is my delight expectation as a customer and what are you actually delivering to me? And those two things must be aligned. Right, so imagine I give you the pill, you think your headache will be gone in 20 minutes, and after an hour you feel horrible and you have a rash on your skin and you feel dizzy. Well, obviously that's not what you expected. So if I have a misalignment there, I will not grow my business. So the four axes of alignment, again, that are truly universal, are that the pain of the customer and the claim that the business makes have to be aligned.
right.
The perception, which is how I understand your claim and how your claim is expressed, your messaging have to be aligned. That the way you sell your product in the marketplace and the way I want to buy have to be aligned. And then finally, my expected delight and what you deliver to me have to be aligned. And if you perfectly align your business along those four axes, you will realize the maximum potential growth rate within your target market. And that's what the
Why
book
do
is about.
why do most of the companies then misalign? Do they not understand that part, or do you think it is because they start off with something different and they expect something different? Why do you think the alignment doesn't happen more frequently than it should?
I think there's two elements. One is that before the book was published or before I gave my TED Talk, people never thought of the growth challenge in terms of alignment, as far as I know. Right, so no CEO wakes up in the morning and says, well, I got four axes of alignment. I need to understand how well am I aligned and rectify those misalignments. Nobody does that. CEOs will get up and say, oh my gosh, I need to fire my sales guys because they're not producing the numbers, or my marketing guys is not producing good leads, the lead prosecution engine is broken and those kinds of things. Or my pricing is bad because my competitors are lowering their pricing. So there was all kinds of arguments and ideas, but they were not really the way to cure the problem, in my opinion. And so that's the first issue. The second issue is there are two ways to to be misaligned with your target market. One is that because you're making decisions that introduce a misalignment, right? So, for example,
Yeah,
BlackBerry was like, we're not going to do touchscreen, we're going to do a keyboard with your thumbs, which worked really well for them until Apple came and said, you need a keyboard, you need a bigger screen. So they made the wrong decision. Or the market is changing and now you're misaligned with your market. So, for example, Netflix, people used to go into, ordering DVDs and they would ship them to your home, but now nobody wants to consume content this way.
yeah.
So the market has shifted and therefore it introduced the misalignment. But thankfully, and in a smart way, Netflix understood that and they went into the streaming business in a very successful way. So those are the two elements, I think, to answer your question.
Now, I would imagine I've been talking to a lot of CMOs, I've been talking to a lot of executives. I would imagine AI is dramatically changing some of these things. Um, but At the same time, CEOs still worry about the same two or three things. How do I grow my top line? How do I manage to the bottom line? How do I make sure that I can build, and scale my business, right?
Right. Hmm.
And you were talking to me before about how you're using AI itself. First, let's take a step back. Just when you're discussing and talking with CEOs at the board level, what are the discussions about AI now compared to 3 years ago? 3 years ago, I would assume they would have been, hey, let's experiment with this stuff. Let's find out if it is useful. I would imagine 3 years hence, there are different discussions, but what are the discussions associated with AI? Or is AI even in the top of the discussion item for
Yeah,
these
yeah, it's
guys?
very much in the fore thinking of the CEOs and the board. I think the biggest challenge is there is a fear of AI, and I think the reason is because they don't quite understand what AI is.
Mm,
So they kind of know that AI will change their business and will have a dramatic impact. What they don't know is how to deal with that and what to do about it. And so I think we're in a very early stage of education, demystification, understanding what AI does really well and what AI doesn't do well at all. And those conversations are happening now. Now, the other issue is the success of AI, if you think of a small model, is based on the data that the company has, right?
mhm.
And the problem is that, and I see that with every one of our clients, the data hygiene and the data quality and the data discipline isn't there. So they have data. When you say, well, show me all your funnels and all the stages and the timestamps, they have that somewhere. But when you say send it to me, you realize that it's not commonly joined, it's just a mess, and it resides in different databases and different, areas. So I think that companies haven't quite understood yet that they have a massive effort to make to really clean up their data. Now, the good news is AI actually can help them do that. But the bad news is that I don't think they realize the depth of that problem and that challenge yet.
So you're saying they don't realize they don't have the data in the right format, or they realize that, but they find that it's too hard to clean it up?
They don't know how bad their data is in terms of organization, not
Got
the
it.
existence of the data.
Easy
They
for
know they have the
consumption.
data.
It's not
Right.
easy for consumption.
Right. Yeah. So we had a company like the other day, we looked at 3.4 million rows. One row is one transaction. But what we realized is that they were not commonly joined. They were not joined correctly. And there was a piece of information that was missing. And then they changed their system 2 years ago. So there was a gap. I mean, that's what I'm talking about is the data isn't clean and there's no real hygiene. Or they grab all kind of data because they can. Now there's so many tools, but they're not really stepping back and say, well, what is it? What is the data that I really need? How do I instrument my business operations in a way that will deliver insights that are actionable? That's the part that I think is missing.
Okay, so let's assume now a lot of CIOs and CEOs realize, okay, we have to get this data cleaned up.
Hmm.
We have to make it consumable or get the data AI ready.
Right.
That itself is a certain amount of project. Is there where a lot of companies are right now, or are they doing smaller experiments in AI while they're trying to get the cleaning of the data done?
I think it's the latter. So they are doing experiments. They are trying things. Um, and they have, sometimes really interesting results, encouraging. Sometimes they don't quite see the results yet. But I think all the companies that we interact with definitely have some AI initiatives because they know that they cannot wait. I mean, this train has left, and they have to onboard. They have to understand what the technology means to their business.
Now, you talked a little bit about AI and how you're using it as well. Your team is using it, you're building custom GPTs and such. Walk us through your thinking around how do you go build and decide? What's your prioritization process for should we build this or should we not in terms of custom GPTs? Because you're putting resources behind it, you're putting some effort, time, energy behind it to be able to build something that can hopefully deserve a value. But you obviously have 10, 20, 30, 50 different ideas that you could build. How are you going through that prioritization on what you build?
Yeah, so we start with where do we have the highest pain? Right? What's really bothering us? What is it that we're doing all the time, but we do it manually because we have
Mm.
no other option? So can we introduce some automation using AI? Can we simplify, the workflow? That's kind of the way we think about it. And then we start to experiment. And I think one of the problem with AI is that you can play with it very quickly and get something out of it. So you get an output. What I think is really hard is how do you message the input, right? It's about prompting and context. What document do you upload? So OpenAI limits you to 20 documents if you want to create a custom GPT. Well, I have 255 documents. Which one should I upload? And then, the instructions, how do you write them? It's very sensitive to even the tone that you use to write them. So what we found out is that it's very easy to create a custom GPT. What's really hard is to get the output that gives you the insight based on fine-tuning the prompts and the input and the instruction. And that took us a while to really figure out. Now I think we got much better at it, but it was in a way very easy and exciting at the beginning, and then we realized, well, it's not exactly what we want, and then to fine-tune that kind of loop was really tricky to do, and we're still learning, and I think that's the hard part, and that can deceive people, I think.
I think a lot of people I talk to, Philippe, they talk about using LLM and ChatGPT,
Hmm.
but they don't really realize that the input prompts, system prompts, and the output, which is the objective of fine-tuning the LLM to give you a consistent result based on what you want as an output, is something that a lot of people can do, right? A lot of people just don't use it that way. They just go, here, let me type something, and they're like, ah, this thing doesn't work. What have
Yeah.
you what have you thought and learned about prompt? Because if you remember about a year ago, 2 years ago, everybody was dissing prompt engineering, saying this is a useless job. Nobody needs it. It's like teaching someone to search, but it's not really that, is it?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of at the next level. Prompt engineering and fine-tuning prompt, you do that by trials and errors, right? You say, well, tell me more, or I don't like this idea, give me another idea, or challenge me. So that's really not that hard. I think it's really the instruction, what I call instruction engineering. When you create your GPT, you have to upload the instructions. I think that's the hard part. And that's a lot more sensitive than changing the prompt. And the prompt, you're just changing on a flight and then you can see the result right away. But when you change the instruction, then that's very different. And that's hard.
Yeah.
And then if you
And
want to go to the next level after that is the OpenAI APIs, right? How do you write those API? Which system does it talk? Which data sets? So that's kind of the next level after the instruction engineering problem, if you will.
yeah. So you talked about instruction engineering
Hmm.
vis-a-vis prompt engineering. It's surprising to me that as we tend to use LLM, we need to get more specific and detailed as opposed to less. Initially, the assumption was, oh, you just ask a simple question, which is the best restaurant, and it gives you some answer. But now you have to be able to say, I actually want a restaurant that is near my home, that
Right.
serves Indian food, that is open right now, that is under $20. You have all of these criteria, what I call guardrails or
Hmm.
instruction set,
Yeah,
right?
the sandbox, right.
Yeah, so that I think is the interesting part. You have to get more specific in what you want. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
There's an Indian dish called paneer butter masala. Okay. It's a very popular dish among most Americans who eat Indian food.
Hmm.
And technically there's only one way to make it, but not technically, there's thousands of ways to make it. So
Right.
if you go to YouTube and say paneer butter masala, you'll get, any number of videos on it. And the top video is the one that is most frequently viewed, right? And
Right.
you can sort and filter and everything else. But you
Right.
go to ChatGPT and say, give me the recipe for paneer butter masala without any other instructions, you're not going to get the best recipe per your taste.
Right. So now the next version of ChatGPT will say, well, there are three different variations, one that comes from this area of India and what doesn't use that spices. Which one do you think you'd like the best? And so that's what's going to happen and what's starting to happen now is ChatGPT will actually challenge or just say, you need to give me more context.
And that's already happening with deep research, right?
Yeah.
Or deep search.
Yeah.
Every time I ask a deep search question, it comes back and asks me, saying, here are the four questions I have for you. Put a context around these questions. Have you tried output engineering? So you've talked about instruction engineering, you've talked about prompt engineering. Have you looked at and done the custom GPTs? Have you done output engineering yet? Which is give it to me in this specific format, in this way, literally like a fill in the blanks thing.
Yeah, we do. And in fact, we generate PHP code just using that. And then we feed that code into our system. So we're taking it pretty far. And the code that generated is kind of amazing. You can look at line by line exactly what they do, and you can tweak that call, and then you can write an API that talks to your system. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff that it does. We format data through tables. We just feed an Excel spreadsheet, which is unformatted, or had dates with different format, and say that's exactly the format we want. Give me the output. We use it for image generation, and now we start to use it for video. You can do 4K video generation now. In fact, Google just announced it yesterday, and so there's a lot of really interesting stuff we can do. We have a customer that we're designing a package for them. We're actually using a design firm. We're not doing it ourselves. But we use a lot of AI to just come up with crazy ideas. We said, well, we want this to be like this, and can you do it with that color? And what if you put that? We like that logo. Can you do something similar for this logo? And it's really remarkable the kinds of ideas that AI generates, and it's very exciting. I mean, it's just things that sometimes like they do stuff that we wouldn't even have thought about. That's really cool.
Absolutely. Philippe, thank you so much for the time. This
No,
was
thank you.
terrific. I'm going to continue to have a discussion with you as you go along in the journey. We'll keep sharing notes. And thanks very much for being here today.
Thank you for giving me your time and inviting me. It's a pleasure and really enjoyed our discussion.